What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name's CJ. This is Out of Bounds. And in today's video, we're going to do another NFL PrizePicks board breakdown video for this Sunday's NFL wildcard games. I think we got a total of 6 games on the slate for this weekend, so plenty of names to go over, quarterback, and all the other skill positions that they offer on PrizePicks. This video, we're just going to cover the offensive side of the ball. We're not going to go into any of the defensive players, and we'll go position by position and game by game, trying to identify the best picks this weekend. So if this is your first time to the channel, welcome. We do these types of board breakdown videos on PrizePicks just about every day for NBA and once in a while for NFL. So definitely consider subscribing if that's something that you're into. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of the videos that I put out. Leave a comment and like, and definitely share. All of your support really helps the channel grow, and we're slowly and steadily doing just that. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. We're using 3 sites today. We're using Roto Grinders, we're using Fantasy Pros, and we're using Roto Wire. And I've got those preloaded with DraftKings projections. If you didn't know, DraftKings has the most similar scoring to how PrizePicks scores NFL football. So the only difference being with DraftKings, they give you a 3-point bonus if running backs or wide receivers hit a 100-yard milestone. So you get a bonus for that. Quarterbacks, they give you 3 points if the quarterback passes for 300 yards as well. So you don't get those bonuses of 3 points over on PrizePicks. So that's something to keep in mind as we go position by position on some of these guys. So I'm going to touch on what I think are going to be the most popular plays. We're going to start it with Josh Allen, Buffalo Bills quarterback, facing the Indianapolis Colts at 1:05 p.m. on Saturday. Josh Allen's projected for 24.9. If you've been paying attention this season, Josh Allen has been on fire. It's been a career year for him. Easily one of the best quarterbacks in the league, definitely in the MVP conversation, if you're asking my opinion. So Josh Allen projected for 25.46. That would put him over his projection over on PrizePicks. We head on over to the next game here, or the next site rather, Fantasy Pros. Josh Allen not on the board for some reason. I think there we go. There's Josh Allen, 23.7. So they like the under on Allen, and Roto Wire, they have Josh Allen at 25.13. So they like the over on Allen as well. So if we go to his game logs, we can get an idea of how he's been performing. 20.26, that was in limited playing time against the Dolphins. So we can't really consider that a full run of minutes or a full game for Josh Allen. He only played part of the game, but just absolutely crushed. As you can see, 224 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns. The good thing about Allen is he also has the rushing upside, right? So he has the ability to use his legs. He gets rushing touchdowns frequently. So we'll look at his game logs here. Touchdown here, touchdown there, touchdown, another touchdown, another touchdown. I mean, the guy, he's like Cam Newton or somebody. I mean, he's definitely a threat to score anytime he's close to the end zone. So he's definitely got 30-plus point upside. We know that about him. No previous matchups against the Indianapolis Colts that we can look back on. So this matchup, it's going to be a tough one for Allen, but, this is the playoffs, so pretty much all of the teams in the playoffs are going to be tough matchups for our quarterbacks, for our skill position guys. So we can't be too worried about that. Looking at projections here, they're projected to score a 28.75 points. They are a home favorite over Buffalo, currently sitting at about a 6.5 point favorite. So I do like the over on Josh Allen. I think the projection of 24.9 is a little tricky. The fact that they didn't make it a solid 25, they kind of make you think twice when clicking the over, but I like the over on Josh Allen. Another guy that's going to be popular but who hasn't been necessarily hot lately is Russell Wilson, Seattle Seahawks quarterback. He faces the Los Angeles Rams, 4:40 p.m. this weekend on Saturday. He's projected for 19.5 points. So if we look at how he stacks up on other sites, they like him over on Roto Grinders. On Fantasy Pros, they like Russell Wilson for the under 18.6. And RotoWire likes Russell Wilson for the over as well. So 2 out of the 3 sites like the over for Russ. Hopefully Seattle lets Russ cook. That would be a good thing for us. That would be a good thing for DK Metcalf overs or Tyler Lockett overs, right? Let's look at the game logs for Russell Wilson. His last few games, 18, 19, almost 20, and 13. So kind of down for a guy that we normally can like lock in lineups and expect 20 plus point DraftKings types of numbers from. But, he's only had a game of 20 or more in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In his last 6 games, one time in his last 6 games has he went over 20 points. In this particular case, we have 2 previous matchups for Russ versus LA. So we can look at those and get a little more information on how Russ may fare against this Rams defense, who is one of the tougher defenses in the league. So if we go back here, we can look at his first matchup with them back in November 15th. He only managed 12.92 points in that particular matchup, and then we get the rematch back in December 27th. He put up 19.9. So if you look at this weekend's projections for Russ, that would be 1 game where he went under, and that would be 1 game where he went over. In this case, I think they do let Russ cook. I like this projection of 19.5. I think he can go over that, and so I am going to take the over on Russ. The next guy that's going to be very popular, I would imagine, at the QB position is Tom Brady, quarterback for the Tampa Bay Bucks. They'll be facing the Washington football team Saturday evening, 8:15. So Brady, obviously, we don't need to go over his credentials and his whole career. He's the GOAT for a reason. He's probably the best quarterback of all time, and I don't think you would find too many people who would argue that sentiment. His projection on RotoGrinders, however, is under what PrizePicks thinks he'll do. We'll say that's 21. We'll round up just for argument's sake. Over on Fantasy Pros, they like him for 19. That's another under for Brady. And finally, 24.37. We'll just round that down to 24. But as you can see across the board here, 2 of the sites like Brady to go under his projection of 22.5, with RotoWire being the lone site that has him over. So if we go back and look at the game logs here, this will be the first time that he faces Washington this season. We don't have any previous game logs to look at, so let's just look at his last 3 games. He's really seemed to finally start to gel with these receivers. He's starting to click with this Tampa Bay Buccaneers receiving core. Last 3 games have been 20-plus point outings, so 23.4, but because he received a 3-point bonus, we have to take 3 off of that score, so technically this is 20.4 in PrizePicks scoring. The next game, he went over 300 yards as well, so we take 3 away from that. That's 26.92 PrizePicks points, and the same situation occurs here in his last game, which was versus Atlanta. He put up 31.26, but if we minus 3 from that, that's still 28.26, which is plenty for him to hit the over this weekend. This matchup, it's a tough one, as is the case for most of these quarterbacks, but if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line can keep the likes of Chase Young and company out of Brady's pocket and give him a clean pocket to throw, I think this secondary for Washington can be exposed. They are vulnerable. They've shown in the past that they can't stop a nosebleed. So I would like Tom Brady to go over the 22.5 this weekend. One other guy here that we should definitely mention is Lamar Jackson. I think in terms of DraftKings and FanDuel, he's probably going to be one of the most chalkiest plays of the season. Of the weekend, 26 points over on PrizePicks. That's a pretty lofty total. Let's take a look at some of the other sites and see if Lamar Jackson can get there. They like him under over on RotoGrinders. They like Lamar Jackson for a slight over on Fantasy Pros. And then finally on RotoWire, Lamar Jackson projected for a slight under there. So PrizePicks has it pretty on the money here with Lamar Jackson's projection. I don't think that that they're necessarily wrong on that. I think they've got a pretty solid projection in place for Lamar Jackson. So looking at his game logs, 25.22, 22.32, 30.22, 34.92, 26.68. So you guys can see that, 20 plus point upside from Lamar Jackson is definitely within the realm of possibilities and outcomes for him. He started the season off kind of slow, kind of quiet, kind of shaky, but he's really been on fire as of late. And I don't see why or how Tennessee is going to slow him down. If we look at the first meeting, however, he did seem to struggle against Tennessee. If we go back to last year's playoff games, he struggled against Tennessee in that one as well. So maybe Tennessee, they ramp it up and Mike Vrabel puts in, an A1 type of game plan defensively and they, shut Lamar Jackson down. But I mean, it's hard to go against a guy who's been just consistently crushing for the last 5 games of the regular season. But if anyone has shown that they can slow Lamar Jackson down, it is Mike Vrabel and the Tennessee Titans. So for that 26, I'm going to take the under on Lamar Jackson based on the history of Lamar versus Tennessee. I think that it's going to be kind of hard for him to hit that 26-point marker. So other names to look at, we can talk the other side of that game. We'll go Ryan Tannehill. A lot of people think that Derrick Henry, he may struggle in this game. He may not get to have those 20 to 30 carries and just, pound the rock, especially if Lamar Jackson or if like J.K. Dobbins or somebody else, if they put up a lot of points and change the game script on Tennessee to where they make Ryan Tannehill drop back and pass the ball a lot. You may see Tannehill just completely crush this 21.5. But let's see what they look like on other sites, the projections. Big under over here on Roto Grinders. Over on Pros, they have him as an under as well. And Roto Wire likes the under on Ryan Tannehill also. So let's look at the game logs here. His last few games, 28, and then a little bit down. And then he's back up again at 37, and then a little bit down at 16, and then back up at 28, and a little down here. So, I mean, he's kind of like back and forth, right? Up, down, up, down. In his first meeting against Baltimore back on November 22nd, Tannehill had a pretty good game. 259 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 interception. Now, one thing that's sneaky about Ryan Tannehill, the guy's got wheels. He can run. He does, break off some runs every once in a while. He's not a Lamar Jackson or anybody. He's not going to go and give you 100 yards on the ground. But look, 20, 35, 21, 55, 38. So there's some rushing upside here, sneaky rushing upside with Ryan Tannehill. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is that, he doesn't have to do it all with his arm. He can pick up a few points and do that with his legs if he has to. So he ended up with 22.86 fantasy points against Baltimore earlier this season. So the projection of 21.5, I know a lot of the sites have him under that, but I don't think that it's totally unrealistic that he can get there. So I'll leave that one up to you. The sites don't like him, but if we look at his past game logs, he can go over the 21.5. But if you're, gun to my head, twisting my arm and making me pick, I'd probably take a slight under, but it'll be close for Tannehill. Probably the last guy that I'm going to talk about is one of the other quarterbacks that's projected to score 20 or more fantasy points on PrizePicks. Big Ben Roethlisberger, he's projected right on the money at 20 points. Big Ben's been struggling. If you haven't been paying attention, Roethlisberger has had some troubles recently, not putting up the big numbers that we've known him to put up all season long. His projection over on Roto Grinders is a slight over on 20. If we check Fantasy Pros, they like the under on Big Ben. And finally, Roto Wire has him as a over, a pretty big over too, 3.87 points over for Roethlisberger. So if we click on his name and look at his game logs, the good news is we have a pretty good amount of data on Ben Roethlisberger versus this Cleveland Browns defense that we can go off of. He did not play the last game of the season against Cleveland, so we only have one game log to look at. But if we go down and look at that game log, he really struggled. He was 14 for 22, 162 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown. Big whoop. He had 5 yards rushing. Not really a rusher at this stage in his career. Early on, he could pick up some rushing yards for you, but as you can see, that's pretty much all dried up here as he goes into the latter stage of his career. Anyway, he ended up finishing with just under 11 fantasy points in that game. And if you look at his game logs before he missed the very last game of the season, he did have a big one here, 25.48. But prior to that, 8.7, 15, 19, 13, 17. So, in his last several games here, he's only went over 20 one time and really struggled against Cleveland in the only meeting that we know about from earlier this year. So in the case of Roethlisberger, the verdict is out on him. I think that he goes under the 20 unless, he goes home and, wakes up and is feeling good and somehow, returns to form. I think Cleveland's going to give him a hard time, and I think the 20 might be a little too rich for me over on PrizePicks. So that's it for the quarterbacks. We're going to go ahead and switch over, not to NBA, but to the NFL skill position guys. We'll crack down on some running backs. The first one being Jonathan Taylor, who just absolutely smashed to finish off the season. Big game for Jonathan Taylor. The guys over at Roto Grinders, they have him at 18.49. Go over to Fantasy Pros. They've got Taylor at 20.6. And finally, RotoWire, they've got Jonathan Taylor at 17.8, which seems to be pretty low. So his projections at 18. Let's see if we can look at the game logs here. He's been getting a ton of work. He is the lead back in this backfield. If he's not touching the ball, then it's usually Nyheim Hines. They're kind of a 1-2 punch. Taylor, more of the running threat. Hines, more of the pass-catching running back. He'll be inserted in situations where it's an obvious passing situation. So the last game we talked about, 38.4 points. We have to take 3 away from that because he did go over 100 yards, so that would put him down at 35.4 points. Still, plenty of meat on the bone there, right, for him to go over this weekend's projection of 18. But looking at his previous games, that would put him over. That would put him over. Even if we take 3 away from here, that's still 27.5. That would put him over. And he went under here. But you get the gist of it. The last several games for Jonathan Taylor have been tremendous. I think 18, even though this matchup is a little bit of a tough one, I think Jonathan Taylor does have the ability to pop a big run at any given moment. I like him. I put him in the same category as like home run hitters like Nick Chubb or Dalvin Cook or, Derrick Henry. As far as guys that can break big runs off, Jonathan Taylor, to me, I've seen enough out of him to include him in that conversation. So Jonathan Taylor, 18. I like the over on him. Let's move on to the next running back, though. We're not going to talk about his teammate Hines. And I don't really want to get into Devin Singletary. That's not somebody that I don't think a lot of people will be clicking on. Singletary is not a very exciting option. Cam Akers, however, is an exciting option. He's been a pleasant surprise. Another rookie running back like Jonathan Taylor who has taken over the backfield for his team. He's projected at just 13 points, which seems awfully light for a guy who, when healthy and in the lineup, gets 20-plus touches on a regular basis. So let's head over to DraftKings and see what they think. Cam Akers, they got the over 16.28 for Akers there. Fantasy Pros has him under at 13. And finally, RotoWire, they like Cam Akers to go for just 10 fantasy points. We'll round it up to 11, but still 11 fantasy points. Guys projected at 13. I'm leaning toward the over here, but you can see that these sites are like up and down and all over the place on him. Looking at his last few games, 11.6 against Arizona. Wasn't a very efficient game, but look at the touches. The guy had 21 carries, also chipped in 4 receptions, had 52 yards through the air. So, I mean, this is considered a down game for him, and he still managed 11.6 fantasy points. But going back to early December here, 21 carries, 29 carries here. I expect this guy to just get a very, very full workload. I mean, even if we take 3 points away from this total because he went over 100 rushing yards, he's still at 18.4 fantasy points, which is more than enough to go over that 13 mark. So I don't know if I can make it any clearer for you guys, but I like the over on Cam Akers. We can look at the Seattle side of the ball. Chris Carson's projected for 14. Carson, he's been good when healthy, but his health this season has been a little bit shaky. He's been dealing with a foot issue for quite a while now. I don't know that he's even 100%. The guy's tough though, and he's probably just toughing it out. Roto Grinders likes him for 15.5. Over on Fantasy Pros, they've got Carson for 14. And Roto Wire has Chris Carson for just over 14 as well. If we look at his game logs and recent productivity, been pretty down for Chris Carson. 10, 10, 8.9, 18, 20. So, I mean, his last 3 games, they've been stinkers. They haven't been very good. Look at his attempts here, 11 plus 2 receptions. So he had 13 touches there, 16 plus 3. So 19 touches there, 17 touches in this one. So, I mean, around that 15 touch mark for Chris Carson is pretty realistic. What he does with those touchdowns is going to be key. He hasn't found the end zone in his last 3 games. That's been something that for season-long fantasy players have helped Chris Carson owners feel a little bit better, when rostering him, is that typically he can find the end zone or had found the end zone in the past, but a little bit of a drought as far as hitting pay dirt for Chris Carson. So that projection once again on PrizePicks of 14. This is a tough defense, guys. I'm going to take the under on Chris Carson. I think that if the Seahawks have a chance, it's going to be through the air, not on the ground. Could Chris Carson fall into the end zone and find a touchdown and break his streak of scoreless games? Sure, he could do that. But I'm not willing to take the ride with Chris Carson. I think he goes under. So let's go to the next game, which features Antonio Gibson, Washington football team. Another rookie running back in the playoffs. Antonio Gibson started and really carried his success from the start of the season through the middle of the season, but then ended up getting hurt and has been dealing with a toe injury toward the end of the season. But let's take a look at his projections and see what they're thinking. They got him at 14.87. Let's just round up to 15 for a nice clean number. Over on Fantasy Pros, they've got Gibson a bit lower. We'll call it 14. And then finally, RotoWire has Gibson at 14. So 15, 14, 14, you kind of get an idea of how they're feeling about Gibson. They think 12 is just a little bit too low. Well, this is a tough matchup. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been one of the better defenses against running backs in the entire league. So if you look here at opposing rushing defense rank, number one. So they're number 1 in the league, the Bucs are, against running backs. So consider me a little pessimistic on Antonio Gibson having a big day. If we look at his game logs, 9.1, 9.9, he's not getting the work that he's gotten in some of these other games where he's, touching the ball 20 plus times here, 20 times here, 20 plus times here. So it all depends on the volume. It all depends on how you think this game script goes. I kind of think that the Bucs can put up some points against Washington, which would make this more of a J.D. McKissic game and less of an Antonio Gibson game. Gibson has been somewhat involved in the passing game, not to the degree of J.D. McKissic. So I kind of think that Antonio Gibson and his projection of 12 is a tricky one. It's a tricky one. All the sites like him to go over, but the only way he does is if they can keep the game close and can continue to run the ball with Gibson. But I think I'm going to lean toward the under, going against the grain, against the projections, and say that Gibson at 12 points doesn't quite get there. So I guess they don't have Ronald Jones, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running back, on the board. Maybe they add him later. I'm not sure why he's not up here. I do expect him to play. So going over to the next game, we've got the Baltimore Ravens. We've got them facing against the Tennessee Titans. As we mentioned before, J.K. Dobbins has really come on in the last few games. He's projected for 13.5 points. Let's go over and see what they think about him on the various sites here. J.K. Dobbins projected for 12. That would put him under on Roto Grinders. Over on Fantasy Pros, Dobbins is projected at 15.6. So that wowould be a nice little overplay for Dobbins. And then if we look at RotoWire, they got him at 12.48, which would put him under. Let's crack open the game logs on Dobbins real quick. Dobbins, as I mentioned, has kind of taken control over this backfield, looking really good in the process. Mark Ingram, his role is pretty much dissolved. It's been Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Lamar Jackson, sort of that three-headed monster for this team on most weeks. 13 carries here, 160 yards, so he went over, so we're going to have to take 3 off of that. That still puts him at 25 points. Very impressive for Dobbins. 13.7 here, 15.1 here, 13 here. So he's been in that 13 range for a number of weeks, 13 or more, I would say. Even going back here, he had 18.5 against the Titans in their first matchup. So Dobbins is somebody that a lot of other sharp DFS knowledgeable experts like Dobbins this week on DraftKings and FanDuel. I think I kind of like him too this week. I think he goes over the 13.5. Derrick Henry, 21 points. That seems pretty on the mark for me. I think that King Henry, as great as he is going to struggle a little bit against Baltimore. 21 still a pretty hardy number for Derrick Henry. We know this guy on any given day can go for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, he's like the only guy in the league that I feel like confident that can do that almost any game. But this matchup, a little bit more of a tough one for him. So looking at Roto Grinders, 22.77, we'll call it 23. 23.3, so 23, 23, and 23. I mean, everybody's pretty much around that 23 mark on King Henry, which would be a slight over PrizePicks projections of 21. Let's open the game logs up and get a quick pick of Derrick Henry's recent performances. 36. Of course, in that game, he ended up going over 2,000 rushing yards against Houston for the season. So huge game for Henry there. Green Bay, he struggled a bit. Previous 2 games, 25, 36. And then finally, let's look at the game against Baltimore from earlier this season. He had 28 carries, 133 yards, 1 rushing touchdown. He was even targeted twice, ended up catching 1 ball, but it was for -1 yard. So if we take that 20.2 against Baltimore, we minus the 3 for the bonus that you don't get on PrizePicks, he would be at 18.2, which would make him under his projection of 21 currently on PrizePicks. So I'm not a big believer in Henry this week. I am a big believer in him for the rest of his career. I think he's a great running back, but I just don't think he can get to that 21-point marker. What do you guys think, though? This is one of the guys that is probably going to be the most controversial this week as far as people being over or under, the most difficult one to project. Do you guys think that Derrick Henry has what it takes to go over 21 points against a tough Baltimore Ravens defense? Let me know. Drop a comment down below. I want to hear what you guys think about King Henry, this season's NFL rushing king. So moving on down the list here, another guy that's just been incredible down the stretch of the season for the Chicago Bears is David Montgomery. He's facing the New Orleans Saints at 4:40 p.m. Montgomery been getting a ton of work. Roto Grinders, they like the under on Montgomery at 17.5, and I kind of agree because this is a tough matchup, guys. New Orleans Saints, they do not play around when it comes to opposing running backs. They are very good at shutting down opposing running backs. So that is something to definitely consider when taking the over or under on a guy like David Montgomery. In this particular case, they got him at 15, so they love the under on Montgomery, and he's down at 15 on RotoWire as well. So two out of the three sites like David Montgomery. Oh, no, I'm sorry. 2 out of the 2 sites like David Montgomery to go. Back it up. 2 out of the 3 sites like David Montgomery to go under his projection of 16.5. Why is that so hard for me to say? Anyway, let's look at his game logs real quick. 28.2, 20.1, 29.2, 24.5, 27.1, 25.3. So as you can see, guys, from the end of November up until the end of the season, something clicked. Something just clicked with David Montgomery and the Chicago Bears offense. They just, I don't know, they figured it out. I don't know where that production was earlier in the season. It obviously wasn't there, but they seemed to figure it out. So even if we take away 3 here, that's 22. 3 here, that's 21. 3 here, that's still 26. I mean, the guy's been crushing, and look at the carries, right? This is what you want to see out of a running back is high volume. 22 carries, 23 carries, 32 carries. A little bit down here, 11, but look, he made up for it in the passing game. 3 receptions, 42 yards. 17, 11. Again, made up for it in the passing game. This guy has become a well-rounded weapon for the Chicago Bears and their offense. He can do it all. He can run the ball. He can catch. He finds the end zone with great regularity. 1 touchdown, 2 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, 5, 7 touchdowns in the last several weeks. But this is a tough game against New Orleans. And actually, they did face New Orleans earlier this season, so we do have a game log from that. He carried the ball 21 times for 89 yards. And then he caught 2 out of his 5 targets for 16 yards. Ended up finishing with 12.5 points. So, guys, I'm telling you, New Orleans does not play when it comes to opposing running backs. I like the under on David Montgomery despite all the success he's had down the stretch of the regular season. This is going to be one of those situations where, he's going to have to fall into the end zone 1, maybe even 2 times to get over that 16.5 point mark. I don't see how he does it otherwise. Alvin Kamara on the other side of the ball, New Orleans Saints. He's been fantastic. We know what Kamara can do. He's the ultimate weapon. Passing, running, pass catching, running. He can do it all, right? Well-rounded running back. He's projected for 20. I do expect him to play. I know there's some questions on whether he's going to be available or not for New Orleans, but I do expect him to be active for this one, being that they're playing on Sunday. So Kamara's projected for 22 over on Roto Grinders. Over on Fantasy Pros, they've got Kamara X'd out. You can see he's grayed out. I guess they don't expect him to play, but I don't see why he doesn't. Anyhow, they had him projected for 18.5 over on Fantasy Pros, and then on RotoWire. RotoWire has Alvin Kamara projected for 23. So kind of have to throw Fantasy Pros projections for Kamara out the window. I guess they just don't expect him to be active for this one. But looking at his recent game logs, you guys know what he did. 6 rushing touchdowns, over 100 yards on the ground against Minnesota. Just a huge day. Even if you take 3 points away, the guy still had over 53 fantasy points versus them. 18 here, 22, 17, 6. But we all know that these games, a lot of them were with Taysom Hill at quarterback. And when Taysom Hill, who is a rushing type of quarterback, is in there, and not Drew Brees. It cuts into the production of a guy like Alvin Kamara, so I'm not really holding these against Kamara here. When Brees is in the lineup, Kamara is a lot better player. Going back to the game against Chicago, Kamara had just 12 carries, managed 67 yards, but look at how many targets he got. 13 targets for 9 receptions, 96 yards receiving. I love that out of Kamara. He's the type of guy that really just can do it all for you. So if it's not going good for him on the ground, then expect for him to get it going through the passing game. So ended that game with 25.3 points. So Alvin Kamara, I'm liking the over as long as he's healthy and good to go. I do think that he can get over 20 points on this one. So I think that's going to do it for, nope. We got one more running back. Nick Chubb snuck in there on us. Let's talk about Nick Chubb real quick. Pretty modest when you think about how good of a player Nick Chubb is. 15.2 PrizePicks points, but he is going against a very, very stout Pittsburgh run defense. So let's take a look at what they think about Nick Chubb. 13.5. Chubb over on Fantasy Pros, 17. And then over on RotoWire, Chubb is projected for 15. So game logs, we should have a couple of game logs here for Nick Chubb. We know in his last game, he managed 16.8 fantasy points against Pittsburgh. We do have to take 3 away because he went over 100 yards, so that would put him at 13.8 fantasy points against Pittsburgh. Looking at some of his other games here, 17 against the Jets, 14 here against the Giants. Let's see if we have another game log of a previous matchup. He was out for some of the season against Pittsburgh. Yeah, I don't have a game log for him there, so I think he might have missed that game due to injury. But nonetheless, most sites agree Nick Chubb under. I think Nick Chubb does go under. He's another guy, though. I mean, you hand him the ball once, and he's got the potential to break off a 70 and 80-yard, touchdown for you, and can just flip the table, flip the script in no time. But I think Pittsburgh pretty much holds him in check. He did break one off against Pittsburgh the last time they met, last game of the season. But I'm going to take the under on Nick Chubb and hope for the best. All right, so that does it for running backs. We're going to work our way through the wide receivers real quick, starting with Stefon Diggs. These NFL videos are long. I try to cover as many big names, good names as I can for you guys. I want to, encourage you to hit the 1.5x playback speed to get through this as quickly as possible. I don't want you to sit here for any longer than you absolutely have to. Anyway, Stefon Diggs projected for 22. He's projected for 22 over on Fantasy Pros, and on RotoWire, they like Stefon Diggs for 19, so they're a bit lower than the first two sites. So Diggs at 19 here. I like the over. I think the Josh Allen to Stefon Diggs connection is a very, very good one. Obviously, he is Josh Allen's favorite receiver. So if anyone is going to pop off for this Bills offense, as far as their receivers go, I like it to be Stefon Diggs this weekend. So his recent game logs, 14.5, 41, 29, 19, 10, 25, 20. So the guy is a target machine, 8, 11, 14, 11, 9, 11, 12, 9, 11. So he's going to get the ball. He's going to get a ton of looks. If he can turn those into, 1 or 2 big plays here or there and a touchdown, then he goes over 19, no problemo. Next guy on the list, we'll talk about T.Y. Hilton, 12.5. He's easily the number 1 receiver, I would say, for the Colts, or at least has been down the last quarter of the season. Looking over here at over at Roto Grinders, rather. Where is T.Y. Hilton? Oh, he's way down here. 14.63 is their projection for him. Over on Fantasy Pros, 14.1. And on RotoWire, T.Y. Hilton projected for 12.35. So they're a little torn on T.Y. Hilton and where they think he'll finish this game. A couple of the sites have him over by a couple of points. Can we open his game logs? Can we learn a little bit more about Hilton and what he's capable of? Sure. 13.7, 9, 11, 25.6, 25 minus the 3 for the bonus, puts him at 22, and then 18 here. So it all depends, guys. I mean, if Buffalo puts a bunch of points up and they put Phillip Rivers in this passing game for the Colts in a position where they need to throw a lot, then T.Y. Hilton definitely goes over the 12.5 that he's projected for. So I'm going with that game script. I think that's what happens, and I pick over for T.Y. Hilton. Going on to the next game here, got to talk about DK Metcalf, 15.5 points. He's someone who has been struggling as of late. He did have a pretty good game in his last one. But when Russ doesn't cook, DK Metcalf doesn't eat. And that's not good for us if we're taking the over on DK Metcalf. So hopefully DK Metcalf's hungry and Russ is whipping up some work in the kitchen for Mr. Metcalf to munch on. So last game, 5.1 points, 11.9, 9.3, 18, 13, and then here you go, 27.7. So the guy has been on a bit of a drought as far as finding the end zone. Hasn't found the end zone in his last 3 games. In fact, the last time he scored a touchdown was back on December 13th. Let's see how he does against the Rams. His last meeting against the Rams, he was targeted 8 times, caught 6 balls for 59 yards. That was good for 11.9 PrizePicks points. His other matchup against LA, only targeted 4 times, caught 2 of those balls for 28 yards, ended up with a measly, pathetic, embarrassing 4.8 points on PrizePicks. He will probably see a lot of Jalen Ramsey again in this matchup. This is a tough one for Metcalf. I just, 15.5 points based on what he's done recently, based on what he's done in the past against the Rams. I'm probably going to take the under on Metcalf here. We got Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, the 1-2 punch for the Rams. I'll skip Woods. We'll go with Kupp in this situation. Kupp, who was dealing, I think, with some COVID-19 related questionability about his availability for this game. I might have just made up that word, questionability. I don't know. Cooper Kupp is probable to play, though. He's projected for 13.46 points. If we look at Fantasy Pros, they've got him projected for 11. And RotoWire has Kupp projected for 14.25. So kind of all over the place on Kupp as far as where they think he lands this weekend. 12.5 on PrizePicks. Scroll over and look at his recent game logs. That would put him over, under here, over there, under here. So a bit up and down. And I think there's still a little bit of question as far as who's going to be under center for the Rams. I don't know that Jared Goff is going to be available. He's dealing with that thumb injury. But if it's John Wolford, John Wolford's not a bad quarterback. He could help Kupp get there. In this case, I'd probably take Kupp as a slight over. We'll take the over on Kupp. Let's move along here. I don't want this video to go too long. We'll talk about Chris Godwin because Mike Evans, a little banged up. He may not be 100% with that knee, hyperextension of the knee that he suffered. Chris Godwin, however, coming off a pretty big game for the Bucs. Against the Falcons, he absolutely crushed. They like him as a slight over on Roto Grinders. Over on Fantasy Pros, Chris Godwin, a pretty big over there, 18. And then RotoWire likes Chris Godwin as a slight over as well. So Godwin's game logs, 30 points. We do take 3 off of that to bring him down to 27. He had 19 in the previous game, 13, 4, 17, 18, 15. So Godwin, most weeks 15 to 20 points is a fair assumption as far as where he will finish. No previous games to look at as far as him versus Washington from this season. I do think Brady and Godwin have a good chemistry, have a good rapport going, so I'm going to take the over on Chris Godwin and his 15 points. I think he could absolutely get there as long as Washington can protect Brady and keep him upright so that he can deliver the ball to Godwin. On the other side of that ball, Terry McLaurin, he figures to be a popular pick this weekend. He's the number one receiver for the Washington football team. Obviously, Alex Smith is his quarterback. That might limit his upside somewhat. The projection is 14 on McLaurin. Nonetheless, looking at Roto Grinders, they have him over. Fantasy Pros has McLaurin over. And RotoWire has Terry McLaurin over as well. So they all like the over on McLaurin's 14, and for good reason. When McLaurin does play and is healthy, he gets targets. And that's what we want out of our receivers. We want as many targets as possible, and this guy gives you plenty. So 8, 12, 6, 6, 9, 7, 9, 8, 11, 12. And he does a pretty good job of hauling those targets in too. 7 here, 7. Couple of down games here. We'll throw those out. 7, 5, 7, 7, 7, 7. So, I mean, 7. 7 is his number. He likes to catch the ball 7 times per game in a lot of his contests. He's been a bit spotty as far as finding the end zone, though. You see, he had back-to-back weeks with a touchdown here. Went several weeks before catching a touchdown in the final game against Philly. 17 here. 14, we mentioned the 2 down games, 16, 13. He doesn't go over 100 yards a whole lot of the time, so most of these scores are going to translate just fine over to PrizePicks. But, yeah, Terry McLaurin, I like the over on him in this particular situation. Going through here, A.J. Brown, he's dealing with a little bit of injury issues. He's projected for 17. Let's take a look at his game logs, or take a look at his projections first, and then we'll get to the game logs. 16.8 on Roto Grinders. A.J. Brown projected for 19.7 over on Fantasy Pros. And RotoWire likes A.J. Brown for 17. Game log time. Brown, undoubtedly the number one receiver for the Tennessee Titans. Corey Davis, also another really good option. So if you're playing on like DraftKings or FanDuel, I like some Corey Davis. He's pretty inexpensive on DraftKings this week. But this is PrizePicks, and we have to look at this game log here and cut down 3 points. So 28.1, 8.3, 15, 21. So you can kind of get an idea of how A.J. Brown does. He is a big play guy. He is a downfield threat. His last matchup against Baltimore from earlier this season, he was targeted 7 times, hauled in 4 balls for 62 yards and a touchdown, putting him at 16.2 points. I think I like the under on A.J. Brown. Baltimore has a pretty good defense overall. They're good against the run. They're pretty good against receivers as well. So I'm going to take the under on A.J. Brown and hope that if Tennessee is able to move the ball through the air, it's through Corey Davis or through Jonnu Smith, perhaps. So moving forward, almost done here, guys. Thanks for hanging with me. Again, 1.5x playback speed, your best friend for these longer videos. Gets you through all the action, all the picks, much, much quicker. Pro tip, 1.5x speed. You'll thank me later. 15.5 for Allen Robinson, Chicago Bears receiver facing the New Orleans Saints. Allen Robinson, 16.6 over on Roto Grinders. If we check some of these other sites, they've got him projected at 18.1 here. And RotoWire has him projected for 16.22. Allen Robinson's the type of guy where, he's matchup proof. He's so damn good. It doesn't matter who you put him up against defensively. he's got the ability to go off on anyone, really. If we look at his last few games, a down game here against Green Bay, was only targeted 5 times, only could haul in 2 of those for 37 yards. So not what we typically get out of Allen Robinson. He's usually around like a 17 DraftKings points per game type of fantasy player. His previous game, 20, 12, 27 here, 13 here, 27 here. Of course, some of these games you got to knock off 3 for going over. But my point is this: Allen Robinson is the man. If Mitch Trubisky's throwing to anyone, odds are it's going to be Allen Robinson, and he does it a lot. If we go back to the previous game against the Saints, he was targeted 7 times, pulled in 6 balls for 87 yards and a touchdown, which was good for nearly 21 PrizePicks points. So I like the over on Allen Robinson. I think 15.5 is just a little underweight on him. I expect him to be closer to that like 16 to 18 point range. So take Allen Robinson over. I feel pretty confident about that. On the other side of the ball here, Michael Thomas, he's working his way back. He's been on injured reserve for the past few weeks. Prior to going on injured reserve, though, he was starting to hit his groove. He was starting to find his lane again, get his swagger back. 15 seems a little bit too low on Michael Thomas for the type of talent that he is. Roto Grinders, they agree. They've got him at 19.4 points. Huge over. If we head over to Fantasy Pros, Michael Thomas is not, he's not here. Paging Michael Thomas. I don't see him. Guys, if I missed him, I'm sorry, but I don't see him. Let's go over to RotoWire. Maybe they've seen Michael Thomas. Is there a Michael Thomas sighting on RotoWires? No. Weird. 2 of the sites have Michael Thomas missing in action for some reason. So we're just going to have to lean on Old Faithful here, Roto Grinders. They love him. They love the over. I love the over. Game log time, limited game log. Michael Thomas has missed a lot of time this season. If you drafted him in your season-long leagues, you probably hate him. But that's okay. He's still really good at football. 16.4 points in his last game. Take away 3 here. 16.5, 9, 16.4, 4.7, 10.1. We don't have a game log for the game against Chicago. He did not play in that one. He missed that game. So the projection for Michael Thomas at 15, I really like the over here. I think he's way too good. I think him and Breeze have way too much chemistry. I know it's the Chicago Bears. I know they've got a good defense, but Breeze and Thomas are about as good as it gets as far as quarterback wide receiver combos go. So I'm taking the over on Thomas, and that's that. Deontay Johnson, Pittsburgh Steelers receiver. This guy, really good when he can catch the football, but he does have the tendency to drop a lot of passes. So he's projected for 16. That seems a little high, but let's see what the other sites think about Deontay Johnson. They like the over here. Deontay Johnson projected for 17.9, so they like the over here. Call that 18 for him on Fantasy Pros. And then finally, they like the over on Johnson as well. So you got 3 sites that like him over. I think it's a little high just because this Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiving core is so talented. Any given week, it could be a Chase Claypool game. Hard for me to say. Juju Smith-Schuster. Also hard for me to say. Even Washington steps up once in a while. They have Eric Ebron at tight end. I mean, so they've got a plethora of wide receiver and receiving options. But let's look at the game logs for Deontay Johnson. Last game against Cleveland, had 12.6 PrizePicks points. 3 receptions for 96 yards, was only targeted 4 times, but that was not Ben Roethlisberger throwing him the ball. As we mentioned before, Roethlisberger missed that game. Some of his previous game logs here, 21, 19, dropped way down to 8, 21 here, 12, 23, but you cut 3 off of that, that's 20. Same thing with this, 20.6. So the guy can play football. The problem is catching the football. He gets plenty of targets. Look at this, a beast. 14, 13, 12, 13, 16, 11, 10. So there's a chance, guys, a real serious chance that he goes over his projection of 16. You know, I'm going to leave this one up to you. I don't know. I don't know how I feel. This might be a fade situation. Because like I said, all of these Steelers receivers can eat. Roethlisberger's been struggling, though. So I don't know that I feel confident one way or another about Deontay Johnson. You guys let me know how you feel about DJ. The last receiver we'll talk about, the only one that's up on the board for the Cleveland Browns, is Jarvis Landry. Landry, if you've known him from fantasy football past, is a target monster, or has been throughout the course of his career. Let's take a look at where they have him on various sites. 14.64 over on Roto Grinders, over on Fantasy Pros. They've got Jarvis Landry at 15. Roto Wire has Jarvis Landry at 14. So they're all in that kind of like 13 to 15 point range. Let's look at his game logs real quick. His last game against the Steelers, he did manage 16.4 points, which would be more than enough to put him over his projection this week. If we go down the list here, his other game against Pittsburgh, he managed only 7. But in between those two games, 19, 11, 20, 28. Couple of down games here. So he's been a lot better if you go back from November 29th against Jacksonville to the end of the season. He's only had one game where he's had fewer than 16 or more fantasy points. So Jarvis Landry in this matchup, I do like the over for Landry here, especially if Cleveland finds themselves in a situation where they're having to throw the football more. So this video is currently at 57 minutes. I said it wouldn't be long. I lied. I am a liar, but we still have to cover tight ends, guys, and that should be pretty quick. So let's buzz through them real fast here. I don't think there's too many actually on the board. Gerald Everett, Jacob Hollister. I'm not going to even waste my time. I don't think anybody's really going to click their names this weekend. Rob Gronkowski, though, is somebody who will probably get some attention on PrizePicks. So let's talk about him. Gronk, we know he is a big-time red zone target for Tom Brady. They obviously have an unprecedented connection. I think it's the best or most touchdowns from a quarterback to a tight end of all time, something like that, touchdown passes. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but nonetheless, they have a great connection. No need to rehash that. They have him projected for 8.1 on Roto Grinders. Over on Fantasy Pros, Gronk is projected for 9.1. And then finally, Roto Wire has Gronkowski at 9.7. So between 8 and 9 points. That 9.5 is looking a little bit rich for my blood, but let's look at his game logs real quick. Gronk is most certainly probably going to have to catch you a touchdown in this situation. There's just too many mouths to feed on this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense when you think of Mike Evans if he's healthy, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Gronk. You know, Gronk's probably like the fourth option on most weeks, so keep that in mind. 4.9 in his last game, 19.8, huge game there for Gronk. He was able to haul in 2 touchdowns, so there we go. Touchdown equity, touchdown upside with Gronkowski, definitely a thing. 5.9 points here, 7.2, and 16.6. So that's just a recap of his last few game logs. I mean, he's got the upside to definitely crush the 9.5 points, but you know, in more games than not, he's put up these little 4 and 5 and 7 point games, guys. So if you think he finds the end zone in this one, take the over on Gronk. I think that there's just too many other ways for the Buccaneers to go, and that Gronk is not going to to get to the 9.5 unless he catches a touchdown. But, I don't like to put my money on, if he catches a touchdown kind of thing. I want to see a guy who gets the receptions, gets the yards, and the touchdowns like the icing on the cake. So one other guy we'll talk about here is Logan Thomas, the Washington football team's probably their second best option behind Terry McLaurin is Logan Thomas. This guy, speaking of tight ends who get targets, he gets tons of targets. So we'll look at Logan Thomas real quick. He is projected for 12 points on Roto Grinders. If we look at Fantasy Pros, Thomas is projected for 9. They like him a bit less. And then finally, 11 points over on Roto Wire. Logan Thomas, the game logs will tell you the story of why I like him. 6 targets, 12 targets, 15 targets, 7, 9. I mean, the guy just gets targeted, peppered over and over again, no matter who's in there at quarterback. Haskins or, Kyle Allen or Alex Smith. I mean, it doesn't really matter who's throwing the ball. They put Logan Thomas in situations where he's always out there running routes. He very rarely is in a situation where he's blocking. He's pretty much always on the field for this team. So I like Logan Thomas quite a bit, even though it's the Tampa Bay Bucks, and we know the Bucks have a tough defense. But 12 points here, 13 points here. We'll count that as 18, 10, 24, 13. So his projection this weekend of 10.6 seems very underweight, seems very light to me, and I like the over on Logan Thomas. Only a couple of other guys that I'm going to talk about here. The last one, or the next one rather, the last one will be Jimmy Graham. The next one will be Mark Andrews, Baltimore Ravens tight end. He is one of Lamar Jackson's favorite weapons. In case you've been living under a rock, the Lamar Jackson to Mark Andrews connection is a real thing. He's projected for 13.5 points. They like him at 15 over on Roto Grinders. On Fantasy Pros, they've got Mark Andrews at 17, so quite a bit more over on Fantasy Pros. And then on Roto Wire, they've got him at 13. So let's pop open the game logs on Mark Andrews real quick. 6.7 points, 13 here, 17 here, 12, 20, 13. He's one of Lamar's more targeted red zone guys. Him and Hollywood Brown undoubtedly lead this passing offense here. So if it's not Hollywood Brown scoring a touchdown this weekend, you can bet your bottom dollar that it's going to be Mark Andrews. But looking at the previous matchup against Tennessee, he was targeted 7 times, pulled in 5 of those for 96 yards and a touchdown, ended the day with 20.6 PrizePicks points. So I really like Mark Andrews in this matchup. Tennessee hasn't done an overwhelmingly good job at guarding or covering tight ends. So give me the over on Mark Andrews. And then finally, Jimmy Graham. I don't know why PrizePicks put Jimmy Graham up on the board instead of Cole Kmet. Kmet has, in my opinion, surpassed Jimmy Graham as the number 1 tight end in this offense. But nonetheless, Jimmy Graham is the guy that they gave us to deal with. He's projected for 8. Graham over on Roto Grinders is projected for 5. I really like the under here, in case you didn't notice. 6.2. And then over on RotoWire, finally, he is projected for just 4.3. So guys, smash the under on Jimmy Graham while he is still at 8. I think this is a great opportunity for us to get essentially what is going to be like a free pick on a guy. I mean, none of the sites have him anywhere close to 8 fantasy points. I just think PrizePicks has him projected way wrong here, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they know something I don't, but we gotta go with our tools and go off of that. So That's going to do it for today's video. My dog, he's howling and barking in the background. I got to go see what's going on with him. Hopefully you liked the video. Hopefully you played it back in some speed that was faster than 1x, because if you didn't, this video is really long. It is now over an hour long. I did not expect it to go an hour, but we did cover a lot, so hopefully you find some value in that. Again, I appreciate all that you guys do. Thanks for subscribing and turning on those notifications. Thanks for liking all my videos. Thanks for commenting and sharing. It really means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the success of this channel. And if you haven't joined yet, we've got a Discord link in the description below. Go click the link, join the Discord community. We are in there every day talking prize picks galore. So if you don't want to miss out on any sharp picks, then get your butt over in the Discord. You guys have a good weekend. I hope you make some money. Peace out. See you.